The regular season isn't quite here yet, but the trade rumors are once again swirling, in particular in Cincinnati. How does that impact the Seahawks, who may have some interest in potentially landing a blue chip edge rusher? We're going to be revisiting the Trey Hendrickson trade possibilities today here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, whether you're in nearby Sammamish, Washington, or down in Salt Lake City, Utah. We appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We have one preseason game left to play. Teams are starting to really ratchet things up for the regular season, but that doesn't mean that trade rumors are not swirling. In fact, they seem to be swirling more fiercely in Cincinnati, and we're going to discuss how that may or may not have an impact on the Seattle Seahawks here before week one against the 49ers. We're going to dish out our first Monday musings of the year, some in-depth takeaways coming out of a preseason victory last Friday night for the Seahawks over the Kansas City Chiefs, and a look at our biggest risers so far this preseason. Without further ado, let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It seems like this has been going on for quite some time in Cincinnati, but the drama continues. Trey Hendrickson still with an impasse with the organization, as the Bengals have not been willing to dish out the contract he's looking for. He's in the final year of his current deal, and even though he's with the team and traveled for their preseason game, I would anticipate you are not going to be seeing number 91 out there doing anything. He is wanting a new contract, and there are now reports, Rob, that according to Diana Rossini from The Athletic, the Bengals have started to at least talk over some possible offers with teams, and the reported asking price is a young defender and a first-round pick in exchange. At least that's what the Bengals are saying. They are wanting to move Trey Hendrickson. I don't know that the Seahawks would be willing to do both those things, and yet at the same time, as we've talked about earlier with Micah Parsons, and we talked about this earlier in the offseason with Hendrickson, the Seahawks have the ammunition to be able to go and make this move, both with draft picks, and they do have some young defenders that may make this still a possibility worth revisiting.
Yeah, I think that when you look at the momentum that the Seahawks have just built for themselves with an impressive preseason, it feels like this is a team that is poised to make a significant postseason run. And they obviously, as we've talked about on so many occasions, that Seattle has created some salary cap space for themselves. So I think that it's definitely understandable why Seattle should be exploring all options. Trey Hendrickson is a terrific football player, and so let's just kind of start off there. And then the fact that the Seattle has a couple of very talented defensive players, if they were going to try to fulfill the reported request of the Cincinnati Bengals for a talented young defensive player. Well, Boye Mafe is a talented young defensive player that is on the end of his contract. Rookie contract, as is Tariq Woolen. And so I think that those are two players that would make some sense in that regard, I think the Cincinnati Bengals might have some interest in. That said, I also think that the news that Uchenna Nwosu has passed his physical suggests that Seattle might just think, you know what, we've already got our guys. They know our defense. They're bought in. Trey Hendrickson, as good of a player as he is, maybe isn't going to be the run supporter as much as, say, a Boye Mafe might be. So I definitely understand why there's going to be arguments on both sides of this. When it's all said and done, Corbin, I think that Seattle is going to kick the tires. I think they're going to explore these possibilities. I would be surprised if Seattle actually pulled the trigger on a trade of this magnitude, considering how impressive that they've been over the preseason so far.
And I'm going to use that as my argument why they need to make this trade, because this is a football team that looks to me like, with the offense that they have installed, just having an NFL caliber play caller, and maybe Ryan Grubb will be that eventually, but last year he was not. Having an identity that's already starting to come into focus here, and the talent they have on the defensive side of the ball, the depth that they have, I think this team is ready to make that jump where it isn't just getting to the playoffs. I think this is a team that can not only get back to the postseason, but can do some serious damage. And so my counter argument for those that may be saying, well, I like where we're at right now, I don't think we necessarily need to go out and make this move. Like, Uchenna Nwosu's missed 22 games the last 2 seasons, and he's trying to come back from another injury right now. Like, I think putting all your eggs into that basket, I think that's incredibly risky. DeMarcus Lawrence is still a very good player, but he's 33. He is not going to be the alpha for that front line. Boye Mafe has been good, but not great to this point. And Derek Hall, we don't know what to expect going into year 3 from him. He slowed down in the second half after a really hot start. So who is the real Derek Hall? Will he stand up? I think they have a really good collection of good players there. But imagine adding a true alpha to this group, a guy that leads the NFL in quarterback pressures the last 4 seasons. That's Trey Hendrickson. So that would be my counter argument here. I think this is one where if you're John Schneider, and again, I'll put the list up here for those of you that are watching on YouTube, there are a lot of players on this defense that are under the age of 26. And there's a few of them that, like Nick Emanwari, if the Bengals said we want Emanwari, I'd hang the phone up before I said another word. Like, I'm not trading my second round safety that I just brought in that I think has phenomenal upside. I'm not trading Byron Murphy II if the Bengals want him. I'm not making that move. However, if Cincinnati says that they are interested in Boye Mafe and or Derek Hall, I would not be afraid to trade both of them with a 3rd round pick. I would not go higher than a 3rd round pick there. But like, that's how good Trey Hendrickson is. And that's how much I think he can move the needle for this football team that I would at least consider. The ideal trade to me would be one of those guys with probably a 2nd round pick. That's what I would offer up because, look, he's 31. He needs a new contract. If you're wanting a 1st round pick and a player, I think it's too rich. But I think a player and a 2nd rounder makes a lot of sense, especially for how good of a player that Trey Hendrickson is. I think you have to absolutely explore it. I'm going to say this too, Rob. Cincinnati, if you've looked at Cincinnati's depth at safety and cornerback, and even their starting lineup, Kobe Bryant would jump into the lineup at corner or safety there. So you've got Nick Emanwari now. You have Julian Love. DeAnthony Bell can play snaps on Sundays. No problem. If Kobe Bryant, and he's from Ohio, so this would be, from his standpoint, this would be a homecoming. That might be a player that you can float with a 2nd round pick to the Cincinnati Bengals, because the report says it doesn't have to be an edge, because let's face it, Cincinnati's got a lot of holes on their roster. So I think that Kobe Bryant might be one of the sleeper guys here that you could absolutely dangle in a trade that might pique the interest of the Cincinnati Bengals. I just think with the cap space, the youth they have some flexibility to move a guy like a Kobe Bryant or a Derek Hall, and the cap space and the fact that I think this team is closer than what we envisioned to being able to get in the mix there. I think Trey Hendrickson, a guy that really forces an offensive hand to have to game plan for him, because he's that kind of a player. You put him with Leonard Williams, this is going to be a really dynamic defense even without him. But you add Trey Hendrickson here, just imagine the chaos that Mike McDonald can inflict on opposing offenses every single weekend.
Yeah, I think you make a valid argument. Just real quickly on the Kobe Bryant situation, as you said, I mean, he's an Ohio native. I mean, he played his college ball, won the Thorpe Award at the University of Cincinnati. This is a Cincinnati Bengals squad that has historically been a little bit more willing to kind of go with college evaluations when they are prioritizing their free agents that are veterans. So Kobe Bryant and all of his collegiate success, as well as obviously all the success that he has had in playing multiple positions for the Seahawks, to your point, he might be able to be a real player for Cincinnati immediately. Of course, he's been a very good player for the Seahawks. I don't know if they would be willing to trade him, but at the same time, I do think that he would be a prize commodity for the Bengals in a possible trade. I mentioned before Rick Woolen, as well as, of course, Boye Mafe, both of them in the final years of their rookie contracts. And so I think that the financial component of this is something that if Seattle was truly going to go down this path and they have to explore, I think that the biggest storyline here would be what exactly is Trey Hendrickson looking for? We know he's probably going to be looking to try to push Max Crosby and be one of the highest paid edge rushers in NFL history. He deserves that, as you just said. 4 years in a row as far as leading in quarterback pressures and led the NFL in sacks a season ago. This is a really, really good player. At the same time, what exactly is he asking for? If he's asking at this age, 31 years old, for multiple years of guaranteed dollars, then that's where you have to be a little bit concerned. That has been something that John Schneider has been a little bit, just struggled to give that kind of carte blanche kind of a guarantee, especially on the heels of Jamal Adams and all of the injury issues that he had. Now, obviously, Jamal Adams and Trey Hendrickson are completely different players, completely different situations, but at the same time, you've been burned before when you start giving guarantees to veterans who play with the violence that both Trey Hendrickson and Jamal Adams play. So again, I think this is a storyline that bears watching. I would be surprised if Seattle makes this move, but I do think that it is one, again, that bears watching, just because Seattle has put themselves in a position to make a fantastic and splashy move like this. And who among Seahawks fans would not be excited if this was a club that truly just pushed all their cash into the pile, so to speak, and really went all in, because it does feel like this is a team that, as we talked about, it could make a significant postseason run.
And the other option that's still out there is signing Jadeveon Clowney and bringing him in with Nwosu and everybody else that they have there, which you would have to give up draft picks, and he's still a pretty good player. But it's not the needle mover that Trey Hendrickson would be. So we'll see. I expect that John Schneider is at least going to be kicking the can on this, because they have set themselves up to be able to make a move like this. And I know one guy that would be pro making this trade, and it's the head coach. Mike McDonald knows what Trey Hendrickson can do, because he watched him torture his former team in the AFC North multiple times a year. So he knows who Trey Hendrickson is and what he's capable of doing. I think Mike McDonald would be fully on board with that. The question is, which player would he be willing to give up to make this work? Which one is Mike McDonald going to be on board? He might be the one that says heck no on Kobe Bryant, because he loves Kobe Bryant and the way that he practices and just how he carries himself. So those are all elements that we have to consider here. But for now, this is all just kind of speculation. We'll see whether the Seahawks actually are a player in this, and if the Bengals actually plan to move Trey Hendrickson. When we come back, we are going to shift our focus back to Friday's preseason victory over the Kansas City Chiefs. Rob and I are going to be dishing out our first Monday musings of the season. What are some things that stood out after we watched the film? We'll get to that up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by BetterHelp. These days, it feels like there's advice for everything: cold plunges, gratitude journals, screen detoxes. But how much do you know that actually works for you? With so much information online about mental health and wellness, it can be overwhelming to figure out what's true and will actually help you. And that's where talking to a licensed therapist through BetterHelp can make all the difference. You get real personalized guidance instead of just guessing based on something you saw on social media. I've found that therapy isn't just for navigating major challenges. It's about building positive coping skills and learning how to set boundaries. Having a trusted professional to talk things through can help cut through the noise and keep you focused on what matters most. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, serving more than 5 million people. It's easy to fit into your schedule. Just click to connect, and you can even switch therapists anytime if you want to. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And for your second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast with hosts Vinny Iyer and Michelle Madjuk. Listen every day to prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager so you can take home your league's trophy this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. The Seahawks getting their first win unofficially of the 2025 season on Friday night, a 33-16 thrashing of the Chiefs. And the reason I'm using that word, Rob, is I don't think the score shows how dominant of an effort this was for the Seahawks, even by a preseason game standard. If not for a punt return in the fourth quarter by the Chiefs, this would have just looked like an absolute laugher. And it was really because of what the Seahawks did from the outset in this game. And I think there's two different ways to look at it. And you and I are probably going to take little different angles here. But when you look at the way that the offense played, and I mentioned this earlier as part of my argument for why you do go all in here and go get Trey Hendrickson, I love the formulated destruction that we are seeing from this scheme. The way the Seahawks are getting after it, running the ball. And I see some things that I think are going to be translatable to week one and beyond. I see things schematically that really do excite me. I understand you don't want to get too high in the preseason, but in particular, there's one thing that jumped out to me. I could talk about Gray Zabel. He had a really good game. I mean, he was moving dudes on skates. I thought Anthony Bradford had a phenomenal outing. How many times he got to the second level and made key blocks. I could talk about a number of these guys, but I think we have reached a point where, and some of you, this may be a reference you don't get, but look it up on Google for baseball terms. But I think that Jalen Sundell is about to Wally Pip Oluwatimi here, because Oluwatimi has now been out almost 2 weeks, and all that Jalen Sundell has done, I don't know that there was a player on Friday night when I went back and watched the All-22, I don't know that there was an offensive lineman on Seattle's roster that was more impressive, and that is saying something, because again, I thought Gray Zabel played really well. I thought Josh Jones looked good out there. I thought that entire starting line looked really good. But Jalen Sundell had a couple of flat-out ridiculous reach blocks where he was able to reach a one-tech or a two-tech to his opposite side. He was able to get to the other side and beat them to the other side and seal them. That might not sound difficult, but that is maybe the hardest thing in run blocking in the NFL, particularly for a center. And he was making phenomenal blocks, reaching defenders. He was getting to the second level. It did that on Zach Charbonnet's first run that sprung him for 13 yards. I just thought everything 61 did in this game was fantastic. And I think when you look at where he fits athletically and scheme-wise, if I'm Oluwatimi, I'm like, I got to get back out there and got to wonder, is it too late? Because I think Jalen Sundell has done enough with, and he already was getting a ton of first-team reps at center and right guard before Oluwatimi got hurt. He has been in the competition. Now it feels like because of the injury to Oluwatimi that he may very well have just stolen this job with the way he played on Friday night.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And the way that he played the week before against the Las Vegas Raiders as well. I mean, he has a different level of athletic ability to enter center that we've seen in Seattle since Max Unger. And so that's just, right off the top. I mean, it remains to be seen, of course, if he is ever going to live up to any kind of comparison to a former Pro Bowl center. But at the same time, Jalen Sundell's athletic ability translates beautifully to this offense. And so, very encouraged by what he has demonstrated. I think that, to your point, Oluwatimi has got to get onto the field. I expect that he will be back on the field here shortly. So I do think that this sets up nicely for the Seahawks, whether it be Jalen Sundell as a starting center against the San Francisco 49ers when the regular season hits, or if it's Oluwatimi. I do think you're going to see both centers be available. I think that Oluwatimi's just his better girth and power and anchor. It sets him up to be better against the bigger, more physical nose guards in the NFL. And Sundell, again, his athletic ability really allows him to be very successful against some of the smaller guys, but teams that are built on speed. I love the fact that Seattle has two starting caliber centers here that at least I feel very confident would be successful. I want to shift that conversation, Corbin, to another position that I think is just so strong that it's something that the Seahawks fans should be kind of reveling in, and that's at the running back position. look, we've had conversations before about who is Seattle going to keep at the back end at their running back depth chart. I mean, obviously, Kenneth Walker III, while he hasn't been out there in the preseason, we know that he's going to make the club. You know that Zach Charbonnet, who's been spectacular, is going to make the club. George Holani has arguably been Seattle's best running back so far throughout this preseason. But at the same time, you invested a draft pick in Damian Martinez. Jacardia Wright has been dynamic as well. You know that you're going to have to reserve a spot on your roster for the fullback, Robbie Oots. That hasn't been something that Seattle has done before. And so that to me is the conversation here, is that how exactly are you going to distribute this? Do you feel confident that you're going to be able to keep a George Holani or a Damian Martinez? If you try to sneak him on the practice squad, I think that you might lose either one of them. To me, the conversation comes down to this, Corbin. It comes down to Kenneth Walker III. I think that he is the most dynamic back on this team. The back that reminds me the most of him that's currently on this team is George Holani, just because of his speed, his vision, his burst, all of those things. He's not
pass
the big,
catching.
Exactly. He's not the big, bulky back that a Charbonnet or Jacardia Wright or Damian Martinez are. So that to me is where I think that the Seahawks right now, if they had to make a decision on August 18th, that they would be going with 4 backs on their roster. With Kenneth Walker III, Zach Charbonnet, George Holani, and Robbie Oots. And then Damian Martinez and Jacardia Wright, you're hoping to sign at least one of them, but you may lose them. But that's just the reality of how good the Seattle's running back depth is at this point.
And it's crazy to think that this is without Kenny McIntosh being available too. I mean, this is just I even thought that Tyus looked pretty good the other night.
He did.
6th running back on the roster. I mean, Seattle's got a wealth of riches there, but they could end up losing a few of those guys if they try to sneak them through waivers. And so it's going to be fascinating to see what they do there. As for my thoughts on the defensive side of the football, this was a game that when I went back and watched, as dominant as Seattle was, I mean, they gave up less than 155 total yards, 6 of the last 7 possessions. They gave up 9 or less yards. So it was a very dominant our defensive showing, but there wasn't necessarily a guy that jumped out except for, to me, big number 95. I thought that was the best I've seen Brandon Peely play by a very wide margin. And it wasn't just the safety that he got in the end zone. He was all over the place. And Kansas City, if they tried to run anywhere near him, he was stonewalling the line of scrimmage. He was getting his hands on ball carriers. He had a couple pressures in this game. At this point, Seattle's in a spot where I think, Jonathan Hankins, if he is not going to be ready in week 1, that worried me a couple weeks ago. Now I'm like, Big Hank who? I'm okay with this because I think that Brandon Peely looks like he's taken a big step forward. He's playing with a lot more confidence. And we've seen Quentin Bohanna, who I thought had another decent game on Friday night as well. Both those guys are massive human beings too. We're talking 335, 340 plus, both of them, but they move pretty well for their size. It's crazy that there might not be a position that my viewpoint has changed more from the first week of training camp to now than the nose tackle spot, where I'm actually feeling pretty darn good about what they're at there because you got those two and you know that Murphy and Reed can play nose in a pinch as well. I'm suddenly feeling pretty optimistic about what Seattle's got in the middle of the trenches on defense.
Yeah, they both have played very well. Speaking specifically about Bohanna and Peely, the safety by Peely was just an exquisite play. You just don't see guys of that size be able to blow up, a guard center double team, be able to get under and through them and be able to create that type of a penetration. That was a spectacular play. And so, that's the thing is that when you are a guy who is fighting just for a fringe spot, you have to make a splash play. And Peely did that. So I said in a previous show that I thought there was Quentin Bohanna clearly ahead of Brendan Peely. Well, that was the type of play that can very much change the trajectory of both players' careers. So, yes, as you said, I mean, Jonathan Hankins is a good football player. He also is the oldest player currently on Seattle's roster. And we know that John Schneider in the past has always kind of leaned towards the younger, cheaper players. So I think that, again, Brendan Peely, whatever gap that there was between him, Bohanna, and Jonathan Hankins, that he has kind of erased all of that. I want to switch over here for a moment as far as some of the guys that I really think that, have really kind of also move the needle a little bit. And I think that you can make the argument that the flashiest rookie is maybe Gray Zabel or maybe a Torrey Horton. I think that Nick Eamon is the rookie that is actually maybe the most indispensable first-year player for the Seahawks this season. And it's because of his positional versatility. It's because of his instincts, his speed. But I'm already looking ahead. Look, with all due respect to the Green Bay Packers this upcoming week, definitely looking ahead to the San Francisco 49ers in week 1. Who does Seattle have that is going to be able to cover a Christian McCaffrey? And I just see Nick Eamon as possibly being a guy that might be able to drop down into the box, play a little bit more of that linebacker role, at least give you a fighting chance because of his speed, because of his length. And obviously, if Seattle is able to have their starting tandem at the inside linebacker spot of Ernest Jones and Tyrese Knight, then sure, then just roll there. But if Tyrese Knight is not available, if there's any kind of hiccup with Ernest Jones coming back into the field and being full go, which I don't anticipate. But again, I just think that Nick Eamon is that kind of versatile player that might be able to give Seattle some flexibility, not only in terms of playing up against the San Francisco 49ers and everybody else that's going to be on this schedule, but also roster flexibility. You don't have to keep an extra safety or extra inside linebacker because Eamon or a slot or nickel corner for that matter, because Eamon might be able to play a little bit of all of those things. And when you're talking about as tightly compacted of a depth chart as this is across the board for the Seahawks, that a guy that can play multiple positions like Eamon might be able to save a George Halani or a Damian Martinez or a Derek Young or all these other players that we talked about, they're right on the edge. He might be the guy that actually saves somebody else on this squad or roster spot.
When we come back, speaking of roster spots, which players have improved their chances of making this football team or at least getting back on the practice squad the most so far through 2 preseason games? We're going to be jumping into that up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up your group chat, get the draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, Rob and I are playing Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too. Whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league, I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years, and I love how smooth the draft day experience is. Our Locked On League's been running through Yahoo for a while now. It offers easy setup. They've got a great mobile app. And, of course, the smack talk. It just hits different in the message boards. I can't wait to rub it in Rob's face when I'm victorious. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. To kick it off, Yahoo Fantasy just dropped Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo. The lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week. Game over. Your season is done until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We're now 2/3 of the way through the preseason. And let's face it, the last preseason game, now that the Seahawks are doing joint practices, they're going to be having a joint practice in Green Bay this week. That's going to be the reps for the starters. The starters won't be playing this week. It's that last audition, though, for players that are trying to get one of the last few spots on the 53-man roster heading into the season. I've always been a believer, even when there was 4 preseason games and still now with 3, that the last preseason game, a lot of the decisions have already been made. Maybe there's 1 or 2 players that you're watching closely trying to figure out, can I sneak into the practice squad or not? But generally speaking, I would think the Seahawks are feeling pretty good about who's going to be on this roster, 53-man roster-wise, aside from a few spots going into this preseason finale. So keeping that in mind, Rob, looking at these first 2 preseason games, and we can consider training camp here as well, it really boils down to who has improved their chances of making this team the most. And I want to start, most of my conversation is going to be on offense because I think the defense just had so many guys that were already locks to make this team. because you had so many guys coming back from last year's squad. Offense, though, with all the personnel changes and the new coaching staff, new coordinator, all those factors, I think there's a lot of players that have given themselves a fighting chance that maybe didn't have it before the preseason started. And I want to start at the running back position, kind of piggybacking off what you were just talking about, the depth Seattle has there. George Holani is a core special teams player. We saw what he did last year in the preseason. He's taken another massive step this year. I think he's been Seattle's best player in their first 2 preseason games. He has been absolutely dynamic. He has stonewalled a couple of blitzes in pass pro. He's breaking tackles on a regular basis. And we haven't gotten to see him catch the ball much, but when he has, he's been dynamic. We saw him turn a screen play that looked like he was going to be stopped for 3 yards, and he turned it into a 20-yard gain in the first preseason game. I think George Holani, if you cut him, you're not getting him back. I think that he is a guy that does too many things well. There are going to be other teams that have running back injuries that are going to be plucking him off the waiver wire. I do not see him getting through. And I also think when you're looking from a practice squad standpoint, Jacardier Wright has just been flat out fantastic these last 2 games. Chris Carson had to be smiling ear to ear watching that 18-yard run where it looked like he was down, but he rolled over the top of the defender, kept his feet, knee didn't go to the ground. He turned a 3-yard gain into an 18-yard run. That was a Chris Carson-esque run, and he has kind of a similar gait, the way that he runs to Chris Carson. I like his vision. He can plow through people, and we've seen some soft hands in practice. I just see a guy that is rocketing up Seattle's, not depth chart necessarily, but he's rocketing up their priority list in terms of guys they'd like to see back on that practice squad. I think both those guys have done so much to help themselves from a roster and a practice squad standpoint in these first 2 preseason games.
Yeah, I think that's well said. These are 2 really good players that have proven themselves to be NFL caliber backs. And so, as I mentioned in the last segment there, I just don't know that there's enough spots for all of the talent that Seattle has at the running back position. But I do feel very confident that you're going to see George Holani and Jacardier Wright on NFL rosters in 2025, whether it be Seattle or elsewhere. I'm going to talk about a couple of players here, Corbin, that were locks to make the roster for the Seahawks. And I say lock, Drew Lock is actually one of them. I mean, obviously, as the primary backup at the quarterback position, he was going to make this roster. But there was an awful lot of talk that Jalen Milroe might take his spot. Hell, there was some talk out there that Jalen Milroe might take Sam Darnold's spot. I think it's been very, very clear that there is a clear number 1, a clear number 2, clear number 3 at the quarterback position. Now, I talked about before that with the using a fullback means that there's going to be a 4th spot dedicated to running backs, and so your roster construction, that 53-man roster, is now a little bit limited with that 4th spot guaranteed to a fullback. Well, now you have a 3rd spot guaranteed to a quarterback. You're obviously not going to be releasing either Drew Lock or Jalen Milroe, but the accuracy, the consistency, hell, the running ability that Drew Lock has demonstrated over the preseason, I think has just kind of reassured anybody paying attention that the Seahawks, should the unthinkable happen to their starter, their clear-cut starter, Sam Darnold, that Drew Lock could come in and at least be a quality option for them as a starter. I don't believe that Jalen Milroe is that. And I want to kind of mention a player in Bryce Cabledew as a draft pick. Again, kind of like I mentioned before with the running back Damian Martinez. Look, if you're a draft pick, then you expect to make the roster or at minimum the practice squad. When Cabledew went down and the Seahawks brought in Satella Lauamea at the 3rd string left guard spot, I thought it was similar to the quarterback spot here, that there was a significant drop-off from Gray Zabel. I don't know that there's that much of a drop-off from Gray Zabel to Cabledew. I think the Cabledew has been fantastic. But then a significant drop-off from Cabledew to Satella Lauamea. To me, Cabledew is a future starting offensive lineman in the NFL at the guard position. I think that he's been fantastic. I think that he has had a terrific preseason so far, and he is somebody that's not getting a bunch of buzz because Gray Zabel deserves all of the attention. Anthony Bradford deserves all the attention, but Bryce Cabledew has been pretty damn good as well.
He's really come on since the preseason started because his start at camp was rough, and he had some really bad reps in one-on-ones where he got plowed. But something has changed since they got into game action. He has looked much more comfortable at the guard positions, and I'm saying with an S because he's played both sides. And he has definitely outplaying Satawa Lamea. I think Lamea is in trouble. A week ago, I was saying maybe in trouble. No, there's no maybe about it. I think that this is now a red flag danger zone for him. I just think he has looked rough both preseason games. The fact that he's now working with the threes. John Benton's clearly not happy with what he has seen. And John Benton's going to reward the guys that have worked up the depth chart, like a Bryce Cable or Mason Richmond, for that matter. Mason Richmond's getting snaps at center. They're playing him at guard and tackle. I mean, if you can play all those spots and do them fairly well, and I thought Richmond had a lot of good reps the other night. I think LeMay, on the flip side of what this conversation is really about, I think he has hurt himself a lot in terms of trying to make this roster. I got to mention a name that's been really a popular one on this show for the last week and a half, but he just keeps making things happen. Derek Young, 3 catches, 52 yards. A couple of his routes that he ran were just fantastic in terms of technique, which that was the biggest problem in his game the last couple of years. He was a very unrefined route runner. He just looks like a different cat this year. And I think part of it's the offense. I think he feels like he's wanted. Last year, I don't think Ryan Grubb had any interest in trying to make him part of the offense. Clint Kubiak clearly does. Kubiak likes the way that he plays. He likes his physicality. I just see a kid that's just playing with much more confidence, and now his athleticism is catching up to that. So Derek Young, to me, is on this football team. If he's not, you're not getting him back. That's another guy that is going to get plucked up by somebody off the waiver wire. And real quick, Rob, one guy on defense that I want to mention here that has jumped out to me the last couple of weeks that I think has really helped himself out is Nehemiah Pritchett. Nehemiah Pritchett has had 3 or 4 great weeks. He has been stacking practices. He's been stacking games, getting his hands on the football consistently. Another guy that it just looks like the confidence level has just shot through the roof in year 2, playing in Mike McDonald's defense. Shaquille Griffin's back now, and Josh Jobs played well, but if I'm those two guys, I'm looking in the rearview mirror because Nehemiah Pritchett, that 4.3 speed is coming. He is making ground on those guys right now. And I think he's a player. He's on the roster, but now you're wondering, does he find his way onto the field at some point this year for the Seattle Seahawks?
No, I think that he might. I think that Carl Scott deserves an awful lot of credit for the development, as does Nehemiah Pritchett, of course. But they, he has definitely taken his game to another level. And I think that the same thing could be said for the defensive coordinator, Adam Durde, and the development that we've seen from the free agent and Jared Ivey, as well as Tyreek Smith. Jared Ivey, to me, to the point that you made before about George Helani being the best player on the field, I thought that Jared Ivey at times has been the best player on the field. And believe me, I was not expecting to say that about an undrafted free agent, but he has been terrific. He was dominant against the Las Vegas Raiders. He was pretty damn good against Kansas City Chiefs squad as well. So again, talk about stacking practices for a guy that has his positional versatility, has his production against SEC competition. He is very much in the mix to make this roster just outright, and definitely would be a practice squad guy, but certainly a guy that has definitely improved his standing with the Seahawks throughout this entire training camp and preseason time. And then Tyreek Smith, and talk about a guy that has just flipped the switch. Again, as you mentioned with Derek Young, I think the same thing with Tyreek Smith. I thought he was on the outside looking in for a roster spot or a practice squad spot when this training camp began. But for my money, Corbin, he has been their most explosive pass rusher. I think that Connor O'Toole is similarly gifted in terms of just his initial burst and bend off the edge. But Tyreek Smith, in my opinion, has been even more consistent.
And I think that's why they didn't play him on Friday night.
Exactly. I think they're trying to be sneaky with him a little bit because they just recognize they have this kind of riches at the edge rusher spot. But Tyreek Smith has been very impressive. And so it's going to be interesting to see if he is able to end training camp with the exclamation point that I think that he needs.
When we come back tomorrow, as always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky, Corbin Smith NFL, and you can follow Rob at Rob Rang. When we come back tomorrow, we are going to be shifting gears to Seattle's 53-man roster because I don't know about Rob, but I got a couple changes from my last one based on what I've seen at the end of camp in the second preseason game. We are going to be revisiting those projections on offense, defense, and special teams. So make sure that you subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure that you don't miss tomorrow's show and you don't miss a single episode. We'll be back with those 53s revised, some big changes, at least on mine, coming up tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your Monday and go Hawks.